Hi, everyone. We're back this year with another roundtable discussion. This time it's about technical writing and technical editing. And I'm Jim Hall from the Technically We Write. And today I'm joined by several outstanding folks in the field of technical education. And so I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves. Ashley, could I ask you to just say a couple sentences about yourself and what you do?
Definitely. Hi, I'm Ashley O'Brien, and I'm a user experience designer with the City of St. Paul. And I currently work in the Office of Technology and Communication on our digital media team. And lately, I've been really focused on our public facing website, making our digital content and our public services more accessible for different and diverse audiences. And that involves conducting primary research and secondary research for different pieces of content related to different departments. And then I'm also working to implement a new design system for our website, stpaul.gov. Also working on a couple different working groups to build more enterprise capacity and procedures for content strategy and digital accessibility. And one of my recent tech writing accomplishments was developing a legal document that gave the city permission to compensate community members who participated in our design process.
Very cool. Quite a lot going on. Thank you very much, Ashley. Jason, can you say a couple of sentences about yourself?
Certainly. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having us. I'm Jason Hibbets. I'm the managing editor at We Love Open Source. That's brought to you by All Things Open. And in addition to doing that, I'm just running my own adventure called Soul Surfer Consulting, doing marketing consulting, and basically have 20 years of marketing experience working with great folks like Seth over at Red Hat, and enjoying what I'm doing now as manager editor.
All right. Thanks, Jason. And Seth, can you introduce yourself with a couple sentences?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Seth Kenlon. I work at Red Hat currently. I do technical editing and technical writing. So I both write like articles and courses on how to use server technology, cloud technology, programming, languages, things like that, as well as edit other people's writing to make sure that it's technically accurate.
Very cool. So, and of course, I'm Jim Hall, the senior editor at Technically We Write. I'm also a frequent contributor to other websites and publications, including All Things Open. Used to be opensource.com, and of course, a few other places. And I also teach technical writing. I'm a professor at the University of Minnesota in the technical writing program. So, welcome everyone. I'm going to just go ahead and jump into our first question. So, it's not just about technical writing, right? So it's all kinds of technical communication, including editing and usability and search engine optimization, SEO, and all kinds of other things. But let me first ask about technical writing. So my first question is, and I'm going to start with Ashley on this one, but what does a tech writer do, right? Is there a single role or is it really many roles? And does it change over time? Ashley, I'm going to ask you.
Yeah, so I think the role can be many or it can be one. It's a lot of flexibility. And I consider my role as a technical writer to be communicating and writing anything in a way that helps people to do something. And I think that the role of a technical writer can change depending on the team they're on or the project that they're working with. And it can also change depending on what the subject matter is. If you're creating a product or a service, it's not always obvious that writing is happening behind the scenes to bring those things to life. With that said, I do think there are some pretty fundamental and universal aspects of tech writing, understanding the audience, for example, and iteration, refinement, continuous improvement, especially writing with digital technologies. That's something we can do now since we aren't using print. So I do think that the role has evolved over time, and I think it's just going to be more and more critical in our world. I see a lot of UX writing and content strategy roles going on. And I know at my work, knowledge articles and other language that we develop to help customers is something that is just getting more and more important.
All right, great. Yeah, lots of different stuff there. And so that, yeah, it can sometimes be one hat or sometimes many hats. Seth, I'm going to put it over to you as well. What are your thoughts? What is there a single role or is it many roles?
Yeah, I think it kind of, at least today, like Ashley says, like it's evolved to the point where I think it kind of has to be. It's not always, but I think more often than not, it is many roles. You maybe start out doing the authoring, but I feel like eventually you're going to end up also being a buffer between development and production. Like you're kind of early QA. I've never been in a technical writing job where part of it hasn't been QA as well, quality assurance, especially for like applications. Like you're one of the people who's finding the bugs as you try to document the way everyone thinks the application is supposed to happen. So I think that at its core, it's definitely at least two roles, but a lot of times it starts to develop into, well, how is the writing actually being presented to people? Is it being presented on different devices, and is it usable on all of those different devices? Are we considering people with low vision or with mobility issues, like accessibility stuff? So I think and even, I mean, even to the point of like, are we considering our reader? Like, our reader is different than the developer. Are we keeping that in mind? Or is our reader base also developers, in which case maybe we do need to take a different tone or a different focus? So um, yeah, I think there's a bunch of different roles within technical writing, but it all goes towards the same thing, which is explaining a process and then revealing the components of that process in a way that reliably produces, the same result every single time. Ideally, that's why we're writing. That's what we want to give to our readers.
That's a great definition. I also especially love that you talked about audience as well, right? The audience is a huge part, as I tell my students, right? If we communicate something and we missed our audience, we kind of failed. So that's a great point there. Jason, what would you say about what does the tech writer do?
I'm just going to add on to what the other folks have said here. Obviously, a tech writer can have many different roles, as we've illustrated. I want to dive into that a little bit. You could write documentation to help users better understand and to use technology more effectively. Um, if you're more in the editorial world, like myself, roles could be, the role could be look something like writing blog posts, articles, or white papers. I feel like white papers have had their day, so maybe shorter content. Technical writers could also be involved in the editing process or the peer review process, as Seth is on both sides of that. Um, and then the last thing I would add is that, Ashley mentioned writing for digital. I think probably, and I might probably have a front row seat of this right now in my role, there's a huge opportunity for video or screencasting to bring technical content to life. So I don't want people to discount the video component of this. That could it's just another world of technical writing. There's a different component of it.
That's a great point about the video. I hadn't thought about that it is kind of another way to, if you're thinking about how-to content, right? I mean, videos these days, like some sort of a tutorial, is actually a great.
Yeah.
It's what a
So
lot of
Jim,
people
like the
tend to look for.
example, sorry, Jim, the
No,
example
no,
I
go
had in
ahead.
my head was on We Love Open Source. We have a lot of shorter tutorials, and I'm like, could I find a way just to make a quick video of this to add it to have an additional piece? Maybe someone learns more visually, and that will help support the text that's already there. So that's kind of what I'm seeing right now, and kind of interested in pursuing.
Interesting.
And who hasn't come across like a video that's like short, sweet, to the point? It gets you exactly what you needed to get done. It shows you where the button is. It's like such a pleasure when you find that one video out there.
Yeah, and it's not like an hour long. It's like some little targeted thing. This is what I'm looking for. This is how I need to do it, right? I don't want to have to scan through 50 minutes of content just to find the one thing. Great. And so lots of great skills in there, and I love that it's so broad. Let me change gears a little bit and uh, uh, what types of we talk about roles, but what types of skills do people need to have to be a good technical communicator, right? We just kind of talked about different types of things that a technical communicator would need to do, but it's more obviously than just putting down words on a page. So, uh, what are the kind of skills that somebody needs to be successful in this area? I'm gonna, Seth, you've got quite a bit of background on this. I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, the skills, I mean, ultimately, I don't know that you need all that many, like, sort of technical skills, interestingly. I mean, you do need some, but I always tell people that their lack of knowledge in an area is often the superpower that you're bringing to the table, because you don't make any assumptions. You are now documenting something from the place of zero knowledge, which is kind of ultimately what we want to assume most readers are are experiencing when they come to our documentation. Broadly, though, I think that the two skills I really associate with technical documentation are sort of, I guess, heuristic ones, like theoretical ones. It's the grasp of, like, process and precision, or maybe even pedantry. Um, you need to understand the order of operations in a process. Like, it matters. You need to know that before you tell a reader to click on a button, you probably ought to have told them to launch the application first. I mean, that's a very basic example, and there are probably better ones that I'm not thinking of. But it's just that sort of that order of operations, and then the precise usage of really language, because, like, what you're writing, or at least to my mind, what you're writing is a set of instructions. It's almost a program. It's an algorithm, certainly, but you're basically programming the brain of your reader, sort of. um, and words matter. I mean, they have meaning, and you need to really sort of focus in on what the meanings are, like the difference between can, should, and must. I've read so many times in documentation where it says you should do this, and you think to yourself, well, should I, or if I don't do this, will the whole process fail? Like, that's not a should, that's a must. So little things like that, I think, are really important to kind of obsess over, and master for that documentation process.
That's a great point, especially that little fine points on wording. Um, yeah, that's a great one. Jason, how about you? What skills does someone need to have to be a good communicator, technical communicator?
Yeah, let me add a few more. I'll start off with collaboration. You should play nice with others. The next one, a lot of people talk about having good written and verbal communication skills, but also, as we're doing this on video communication skills are also important, to add to that list. So written, verbal, and video communication skills. And then something practical, I find myself doing this daily, is focus. Because technical writing can be very similar to coding, and with respect to that, it requires focus, minimal context switching, and I mean, you do not want to make a mistake writing a technical document that someone's going to be follow that could destroy someone's computer. So we want to be very careful with spaces, periods, code syntax, those type of things. So collaboration, communication skills, and focus.
I like that, especially the piece around collaboration. Ashley, how about you? What skills does someone need to be successful in your view?
Yeah, there's a lot of really great stuff that's already been said about, the writing process and about collaboration and communication. I guess I kind of think about technical writing as like both an art and a science. So I think the science part is where I really think about like those design skills, those problem solving skills, knowing when to seek input, knowing how to make sense of what you find and tie things together, and how to involve others. Like, there is a science that can take practice, and the best part is there's tons of best practices. So we can look things up, we can talk to each other, we can learn from our mistakes, all of that getting towards the science behind tech writing. And then I do think there's an art. There is like an innate talent for doing this work. Things like a strong sense of empathy, being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and having just a never ending curiosity for what things are like for other people. Style and their own experience and worldview to how they approach the work and how they handle conflicts and how they rise up when there's a setback or a difficulty. So I think that, bringing technique based upon your lived experience, your professional experience, and refining your technique over time by staying in contact with other people in the field and always learning and growing and seeking new information. I think those are some of the skills that I use the most. So those like design skills, problem solving, systems thinking, human-centered design, all those great best practices, but then also really leaning into the human side, what I bring to the work and what I really find empowering in helping others.
That's great. Thank you very much. That's outstanding. I'm gonna so it's more than just skills, of course, too. It's also, there's tools that people have to use all the time. And so Mike, I'm curious about what kind of tools you use in your roles. And so my perspective is I teach a class on writing and digital technologies. And so students learn in that class how to, use certain tools and technologies like HTML and Markdown and GitHub and XML, including things like DocBook, DITA. They do book interiors with LibreOffice. They do print-ready flyers and postcards and posters and things with Scribus as a desktop publisher. And so it's just lots of different tools that you kind of need to use in the industry. And I'm sure that it varies depending on where you are. So I'm curious, what tools and technologies do you use? And so I'm going to start with Jason, because I imagine you deal with a lot of different file formats for what people send you as an editor. So I'll start with you. What kind of tools do you use?
First of all, I love this question, and I can't wait to hear everyone else's answers. And I do have a list, so I'm going to get right into it. I'll start off with knowing the basics of HTML and staying updated on changes is really critical. In my work, I also use an online HTML editor. It's called onlinehtmleditor.dev, and you can just drop in your code, and I use it to do a final check. I'm going to get nerdy for a second. I actually go in and replace things like curly ticks and curly quotes and non-breaking spaces and other pet peeves of mine. And I use the HTML editor to help me with that. And because of my role as a managing editor, the understatement of the century, I deal with lots of different file formats. They come in many different shapes, sizes, and formats. I mostly work in Google Docs and Markdown, though, if I had to surface a few to the top. And then Grammarly is my friend, Grammarly. And but my new best friend, my new writing assistant is ChatGPT. And so I'm going to admit that I was hesitant at first about using this tool, but once I started to get better at writing prompts and getting better results, I was really fascinated by it, and it's really become an assistant to me. Let me give you some examples. So I use ChatGPT to help come up with better title options for articles. And to be clear, I'm usually mixing and matching or mashing up some of the responses I'm getting. I'm not just taking exactly what ChatGPT is giving me. And I'm using those to provide the best title options that describe the article that's best for the reader. And I've had a lot of really good results with this lately. Another example, I do a lot with video scripts. And so I will upload my video script to ChatGPT and ask for help to give me a summary of the content. And so as an example script, I would do something like, I need help writing a summary for a developer audience for a video transcript that I can share. And I upload it, and within seconds, I'm getting a summary that is like 95% of what I want it to be, or what I would have written anyway. And it's just saving me a ton of time. The last example I'll give is actually just did this today. I needed to make an update to my bio, and I just wanted to see, like, get a little bit more concise. So while keeping it, professional, fun, and inviting, I got assistance updating my bio, and I really liked the results. So one important thing I want to mention about this, though, is a concept that I learned from a friend, Mark Hinkle. He's a solopreneur in the AI space. I did an interview with him for We Love Open Source, and he uses AI to generate his weekly newsletter. But he's a, quote, human in the loop with his content, and I've embraced this concept. So I start with original content. I use my assistive technology to create better content, and then it's reviewed by a human before it's ever published. So I'll stop there because I could keep going with the tools, and I want to hear the other answers, and I'm sure we'll have maybe some lively conversation about this.
I can tell you right now, I'm going to be emailing you later on with a follow-up about how you do the titles with ChatGPT, because I'm bad at writing titles. So definitely follow up on that one. So, okay, that's great. So, Ashley, how about you? What kind of tools do you use?
Yeah, well, I definitely have to start using ChatGPT, but currently I do a lot of prototyping, creating concepts from information we put together, and then to visualize our final product in a draft state where we can make a lot of changes and bring different perspectives in. So I use a ton of collaboration software like SharePoint and Google Docs, and some others that are where we can get like audience feedback, like Mentimeter. And then I use a ton of different prototyping tools. Right now, I'm really using Adobe XD for most of my work, but I've used Sketch, Figma, Omnigraphel. They all kind of feel the same to me. And then when I am working with teams to really structure information, I will take notes using a note-taking tool like OneNote, and then I organize my insights in SharePoint using a Microsoft list, and I create wireframes in Visio, and I use some mapping tools. One we use right now is called DynoMapper to create like site maps and taxonomies of information. And then similar to Jason, I like to check the work after it's written. So I use a lot of the Hemingway app just to check readability, see if there's any words that are above our target grade level for accessibility in plain language. So yeah, we use a lot of different tools. I think the place where we're really headed is into more like knowledge management tools. We're currently setting up our IT software, and we're drafting a lot of knowledge articles for that. So our users have self-help resources. We're currently using SharePoint for some of that too. So that's where a lot of our technical writing is happening.
Oh, yeah, that's great. I love that. That's terrific. Seth, do you have anything to add? What kind of tools do you use?
Yeah, I use, as you mentioned, Jim, tools like GitHub, or just Git, really, plain old Git without the hub, DocBook, or any XML schema, Markdown, or any low overhead structured text like restructured or RST restructured text, Markdown, ASCII doc. Pandoc is a really great utility for converting file formats from one to another. But I feel like eventually, and a text editor. Text editors are important. You'd want to be able to write somewhere. I think in general, though, like if you maybe at first you might really think about the tooling, but eventually I think you do start to get sort of a very broad understanding that there are tools, and then you eventually realize that they basically all do the same thing. It's kind of like, I'm from the film. I went to film school, used to work in film. When you first start out with cameras or lights or whatever kind of equipment you're using, it really seems to matter which one it is. And then 5 years later, it's just someone can hand you a thing that you've never seen before, never held in your hands, and it takes like 15 minutes, and then you're up to speed. You know everything that you need to know to start working with it. And I think that's kind of the same way with technical writing. It's kind of like you go to a job, or you start on a project, and they say, oh, we use ASCII doc here. Well, you've never used ASCII doc. Well, don't worry, it compiles down to doc book, doesn't matter, whatever. Okay, well, what's the 1-page cheat sheet to get me started? Got it. And then you're off and running. So I think just taking a really broad view of like tooling really helps. I mean, get the basics like XML and Markdown and HTML, like Jason said. Get and understand like content management systems, whether it's Git or I don't know, other things out there. I can't think of any right now, but
How
probably
about
SharePoint. I don't know.
Drupal or WordPress?
Drupal or WordPress. Exactly. Yeah. You get like the basics, and then you use that as a springboard to just kind of carry that knowledge on into whatever other tool you might be thrown at on any given project.
We do a real quick follow-up on this before I go to our last question, and that is, so one thing I tell my students, for example, is if you're trying to get into the field, and this kind of plays into our next question anyway, if you're trying to get into the field, there's lots of different tools out there. So for example, Oxygen is the tool that I teach for doing DITA work, and there's lots of different DITA editors out there. And so the advice I give my students is it doesn't matter if the place you're applying actually uses Oxygen, as long as you know DITA. That can't be the first time you've ever experienced DITA when you apply to work for that place. Is that your recommendation as well? Like, know the generals, we'll teach you the specifics? I'll leave it to anybody who wants to pop in on that.
Absolutely. When I was applying for jobs, and there have been many times, I would look at the list of expectations that they had, make sure that what I knew sort of aligned. And then if there were any specifics that I would find out about during an interview or whatever, then I would take a crash course myself just to kind of get a little bit up to speed on that new technology that I wasn't familiar with, trusting that armed with a little bit of knowledge, they would be able to apply the specifics. And that's been true so far.
Yeah, Jason, you
I'll add something in the similar vein around. Oh man, I just lost my train of thought. Let me get it back here a second.
I actually had one other thing to add to my tooling, and I'm going to say a general scripting language. I think that's important, actually. It doesn't have to be anything like fancy. You don't need to go learn like freaking Java or something. I mean, just a little bit of Python, a little bit of Bash, whatever, something to automate a process for yourself. I think it's helpful. Not required, but it is helpful.
My thought came back on the organizational side of things. In a previous publication I worked for, we used Trello. Right now with We Love Open Source, we use Basecamp. So I would say like to get to understand like basic stuff, like if you can understand something like a Kanban board, it doesn't matter how it's implemented. You can move cards from here to there, and you can create columns and so forth. So I use Kanban boards to help keep my content organized during the editing process, from draft in hand to copy editing to finally final prep and then finally publication. So I thought Seth might mention it, but I save those for now.
Yeah, that's a good
Alright.
one. Any kind of project management awareness is very helpful.
Very cool. All right. So I think the general takeaway there is, know the generals, right? And so understand the concept, and it doesn't matter if you've got the right tool, as long as you know the tool, a tool, right? That's something you can carry with you. So let me go and take that into the sort of the last question here. So what should folks know if they're getting into technical communication, right? It's a great field. It's always growing. So if someone was just getting started, let's say a student or maybe someone transitioning into the field, where should they start? How can they get started? So the quick little wrap up with this one. I'll start with Ashley. What things would you recommend?
So I consider UX design my current job, and also technical writing as a practice. And so I definitely advise someone who's interested in tech writing to get started in their practice right now. And so I always like to start everything with research. And I think if you want to be successful as a tech writer, you want to be really fluent in writing research questions and finding methods to answer those questions. And so I would recommend getting started in that. You could even have something with a dual purpose, like your research question is, what are some cool jobs that involve tech writing? And then you can embark on that research journey and write it down and refine it, and bonus points if you can get feedback on it, and refine it even more. Just getting that practice and building that comfort and familiarity with different tools and different milestones in the process. I really like, Jason, that you brought up Trello and project management. That is like a huge part of my work as a tech writer and UX designer. And I think any way you could get started by learning like Kanban methodology, creating a backlog of things you want to do, things you want to learn, and moving things forward in the process, and keeping track of your tasks. I think that's another way to get started and to build your skills, and also be learning how this all works and finding information. Um, you can do, for that research part, you could do like Googling, just do secondary research to see what's out there. But I also think that primary research is really important. So going out there and finding information that has never been written down before or never been found before. I get a lot of requests on LinkedIn to do informational interviews. So I think professional networking is a really great way to get primary research done about technical writing, and to see how technical writing looks in different roles, and maybe what are some niches that might interest you. So definitely encourage you to get started as your first step, and really centering in on the research and practicing those tools, not waiting until you pass some magic threshold to get started, but just consider yourself a tech writer and find out what part of it you love the most.
I love that advice. That is great advice.
Yep, that
Uh,
resonated.
yeah. Jason, I'm gonna go over to you, and then I'll wrap up with Seth on this one.
I don't want to follow up after that. That was really good. No, so depending on where you're at in your journey, my first response, if you're just kind of individually out there trying to become a technical writer, is find your audience. It's easier said than done. But we talked earlier about defining your audience. So then once you define them, you got to go find where they're at. So if you're just getting started, I would encourage folks to start creating a portfolio of work. Maybe you can use Trello to help you with that, or Kanban, to get that backlog. And if you're looking for a job, it's nice to get paid to write. So when you're starting off, getting paid to write is nice when appropriate, but also giving back and paying it forward or donating your efforts might be necessary, or something to consider in the beginning. I do work with other blogs and publications, and so if you are submitting your content to those, be sure to see if they have a style guide that you can review beforehand. That's always important, to try to match the style of the publication you're working with. If you're out on your own, you could consider starting your own blog, but if you're not technical, that could actually be a good thing, because you can actually learn how to set up a WordPress or a Drupal instance, and that could kind of be something to help keep your skills sharp. And then just to say it out loud, since I do work for a publication, anything open source related can be submitted to the We Love Open Source Hub. And for those of you not familiar with it, it's an educational blog focused on open source technologies and communities. We accept blogs, tutorials, how-tos, and we have a growing audience. So we welcome your submissions.
That's
Seth,
a
over
great,
to
and
you.
I always recommend that to my students as well, too, by the way. It's like, if you want to write, get experience doing tech writing, right? Write about open source, right? Download a Linux distribution, a live distribution, and write an article like, here's 4 things I learned about Linux over the weekend, or what was my first time experience with Linux, what that was like, or download LibreOffice. Here's 5 things I learned how to do with LibreOffice the weekend. It's like, it doesn't have to be a big, insightful thing, because no one has your perspective yet, right?
Exactly. And I would say the getting started content is very popular, because we have a lot of folks out there that are just getting into some of this stuff. So even if it's, like you said, download Llama file and play around with it. Here's 3 things I learned. That's an article, and it doesn't have to be super technical.
Yeah. And thanks very much for that. And so, Seth, what advice do you have?
Yeah, well, I think I'll kind of lean into something that I said earlier, and that I think is kind of what you and Jason are saying. Like, you don't really technically need to know a whole lot. Like, I mean, again, there are things that you should know, but I mean, really, I think most important is that you have the compulsion to try new things. Um, and I say compulsion because it's not that you have to. You need more than just the willingness. I really think that you kind of have to, like, you have to look up from your desk someday and realize, oh my gosh, I've just been screwing around with this new technology because I just got distracted by it because it's just so cool to do that. So there really has to be a compulsion there. And trying new things helps you discover sort of the stuff that you're documenting. Like when you are documenting something, you're discovering new things about it. You're discovering the sort of the details behind the surface. And it also helps you learn the new tools that you're inevitably going to encounter at within any given project. So I would say that that's the most important thing, is the compulsion to try new things. I do think maybe you should also have sort of an inkling somewhere in your head of sort of a programmer mindset, not meaning that you need to be a programmer or consider yourself a programmer or be interested in programming, but you do, as I said before, you kind of need to have the discipline to recognize that the order of things is very important, and how can I express the order of those things to other people, but mostly a compulsion to try new things.
That's great. And so thanks very much. This was a lot of fun. I'll also add my own quick little thing on that last one, which is that there's so many ways to write an article and so many things to write about. There was somebody that we used, Seth, you and I used to work with another writer for another publication. Actually, Jason, you're on that as well. We had there was an author who said that he wrote articles about how to document things he did every day. And it's like, he might not do it again for 6 months, but in 6 months, he said, I looked up my article and reminded myself how to do it. And so that's another way that you can write an article, right? So from that perspective. So this was a lot of fun and I learned a ton, and thank you, each one of you, for Jason, Seth, Ashley, for being part of this roundtable. So just thank you very, very much. And I'm going to go ahead and end the video. Thanks, everyone.